What is going on, Akshar? How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Hi, guys.
We have just done a coaching session. We're just off the back of a 1 hour long coaching session. And in that session, we were working on a new magic training drill that is going to make training poker both fun, but also insanely productive for you guys. We really enjoyed this, right, when we just did this.
Yeah, it was definitely a good kind of structured way to do your training sessions.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of the problems people have with training is that they don't have the right structure, they don't have the right protocol to get the most out of that precious study time. So today, this is part of our training sessions series, and we're going to jump into a spot which is blind versus blind. We've checked the flop in the following hands that you're about to see, and we have faced a bet of some description from our robot opponent. Akshar, do you want to talk us through the protocol, the general protocol for how I've taught you to approach these study sessions before we actually get into the specifics of this one?
Yeah, so one of the first things we want to do is decide whether our training session is going to train our hand or our range. And
Mm-hmm.
for the purposes of this video, we're going to be going to be trying to train our range rather than our hand. The differences are quite large. So if you want to train your hand, you just want to kind of blitz through like, oh, this hand's a fold, this hand's a call, this hand's a raise, etc., etc. And when you want to train your range, you're kind of going into medium depth. This is what we're trying to aim for. And to that end, we're going to have three ideas of how our range plays. We're going to look up the output. So after we've decided three things that we're kind of looking for in the spot, we're going to look at the output. And then we're going to take notes or screenshot or anything like that, which we might not do in the video, but we would do outside the video.
Yeah, so we may add that to like a flashcard deck. So just to summarize, we're going to start by getting acquainted with the spot and deciding that we're going to train our range, not our hand. We're going to then list three heuristics about the spot. One will be about our hand pretty often, like what will our hand do here and what will our hand class do here. There's other hands that are very similar to this hand, aren't this hand. Then we're going to look at the defense threshold, like where you think the cutoff point between continue and not continue is, right? That's a very important carrot poker school cornerstone of any thought process where we're facing a bet. Then thirdly, we'll talk a little bit about raising, right? Like where do we think our raises will come from? What hands will we raise for value? What hands will we raise as a bluff? What will be our overall raise frequency with our range in the spot, and go from there. So you are the contestant today and I am the quiz show host. So let's get into the 9-7 of diamonds facing this bet, blind versus blind. We've checked it over to our opponent who's float bet 1/3 pot.
Talking about a hand of this kind of hand class, this is what we would consider weak backdoors. So we don't really have much. We just have a kind of weak backdoor flush draw, maybe a weak backdoor gut shot to the bad end of the straight, really. So this is probably going to end up as one of our folds in this action sequence. That's kind of where I'm going to go with that. So this is going to end up being a fold.
So that's
Our
heuristic
second
number
point
one.
is,
And we will look
yeah,
up the solver in just a second, guys, to show you how close Akshar got. And then Akshar will then get any feedback. If he got anything wrong, he will note that and he'll write down his heuristics at the end when he's got feedback from the solver. We're going to bring up the complete solution to this in just a second. But heuristic number one, to summarize, is that weak undercard backdoor flimsy hands are going to be insufficiently strong to continue and will be pure folds in this branch of the game tree. Okay, on to number two.
number two is going to be our defense threshold. So I think all pairs are going to defend once we've checked. Because we're blind versus blind, we don't have the luxury of just folding all our pairs. Even weak bottom pair and under pairs are going to have to defend with two set outs and the ability to bluff or the ability to just be good. So now we're going to move on from that. Since I'm certain that all pairs are going to defend, we're going to have to go on to what's the next best thing. So I think all backdoor king X flush draws are probably going to have to defend. And so that leads me to the queen X flush draws. I'm not sure about this. I'm going to say that some of them will defend and some of them won't. Preferably the ones with the backdoor flush draw, sorry, backdoor straight draw will have to defend,
Mm-hmm.
and the ones without won't. So that's kind of where I'm
That's a
going to
really nice
draw my line.
estimate. Okay, great. What about offsuit, like brute force showdown value cards? You talked about suited cards there.
Oh,
What
yes.
about things like just naked king high with no backdoor flush draw? Where would you draw the line there? Like king nine or something? Or what do you think?
Well, I think, well, anything better than king nine is a gut shot, right?
Right.
King 10 is a gut shot.
Yeah.
King jack is a pair.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think king nine offsuit is just going to have to fold. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not good enough to continue.
Cool.
King eight offsuit is definitely going to be a fold, and we don't really have anything worse than king eight offsuit, I think. So,
We also
yeah.
have clubs, so we can lump clubs in with the offsuit cards for this, for
Clubs,
the purposes of this.
clubs are interesting. I'm going to assume that all club variants that don't have the gut shot are going to have to just fold.
Okay, great. So it's good to sort of be fully comprehensive when we're going through all of the different hand classes
Yeah.
that can constitute that call fold threshold, the difference between a hand that's strong enough to continue and a hand that's not. Okay, on to your third heuristic, Akshar. That's going to be about raising. What are you going to say here about the construction of a raising range in this spot?
I don't think we're going to have to do anything funky like turn something with showdown value into a bluff yet, at least. So I think we're going to be mainly focusing around the 3-5, the gut shots that we have here, 3-4, 3-5, maybe some of like the better gut shots like King 10 will bluff sometimes as well. Definitely the ones with the backdoor flush draws will be raising probably more often, but that's kind of just, I don't know, like a small thing. Maybe we have to bluff like low cards more often, just so that there's more folds from villain. Like we probably want him to have like a 10 or a queen or something. So maybe like even, yeah, that's it. I don't really know if 6-4 is going to bluff or 7-5. I'm gonna guess they're too weak, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do make it in this. And for the purposes of this, just not do it.
Yeah, I think it's important to like try to give an answer, even if you're not sure. In game, you would have to choose whether you thought they were raises or not,
Sure.
right? So I think it's kind of cool to be like, while I'm only 60% confident because I'm leaning this way, I'm going to say that they're not, and then I'm open-minded to being told that I'm wrong by the solver. Okay, so I'll summarize your 3 heuristics then. So first off, we said that our hand class is going to be a fold in this configuration. Our second heuristic was that our defense threshold would be anything stronger offsuit than King 9 when it comes to King High, of course, because those are gut shots, but not anything like King 9 of clubs or offsuit or worse. With the backdoor Queen X, well, first off, you thought all backdoor flush draw King X was going to be continuable in one way or another, but you thought that Queen X only would be if it also had backdoor straight draws, like Queen 9 maybe would be a continue, but something like Queen 7 with less of those perhaps wouldn't be a continue, right? Something like that. Or Queen 5. Yeah, maybe Queen 5 would, but Queen 7 wouldn't, or something like that.
Just a quick adjustment to that. I think they're going to have to be Queen X with the nut flush draw. So I say the nut, that's the spade variants, not hearts and diamonds. I think hearts and diamonds is just going to have to fold.
Okay.
Like we want to have the best flush when we do hit our flush more often than not.
So what we'll do now is we'll take a look at the output and we'll see how close you got, and then where you're right, we'll jot down your heuristics as permanent, reliable things that we can always come back to. And where you're wrong, if you're wrong, probably you won't be because you're a pretty good poker player, we will, look at your teaching points and what you can actually get out of it. So here is this, so we're going to explore your heuristics one at a time here. So the first one was that your hand class was going to be a fold, and actually we are, I wouldn't say like totally wrong, but we're a bit off on this because actually the 9-7 of diamonds is technically like really close to 0 EV. The numbers are actually positive, but the accuracy is not sufficient to say that that's definitely plus EV. But it's definitely murky, right? It's like around 0 EV to raise, which is pink here, or call, which is green here. So we're actually able to, we're indifferent with those hands not losing. So a calibration here would be that the size of the backdoors actually really matters. So if you just make the card a little bit worse and you say that it's like 7-6 instead of 9-7, you can see here that your hand is basically going to become a pure fold at that point. So that's where it's going to swing. So you're pretty close here, but we could basically calibrate this by saying that the size of the backdoor matters. Yep. Moving on to the threshold about King High, you can see that King 9 and King 8 of clubs and King 7 of clubs are actually all indifferent. So this is really illuminating for me as well. I was not sitting here thinking, oh, actually, you're so wrong. I can't wait till the solver tells you off, because I was kind of on board with a lot of what you were saying there. I'm kind of surprised. I did think that like King 9s and stuff would be a bit too good to fold or to pure fold, but I didn't realize that so much of this like King 4 of clubs and stuff is going to be defending. With your Queen X backdoors, it looks like when they do have the backdoor flush draw, they are invariably going to put money into the pot, like regardless of their size. So what we can really do here is say that you and I, and probably everybody watching, apart from the maniacs out there, not you guys are different, but most of us are overfolding to small bets on this node, which means that when villain goes ahead and bets small on this node, they're printing money against even fairly strong regs because it's so counterintuitive and so unnatural to hit the right defense frequency against this tiny bet. But the way I would teach this to the people watching is I would say, you're not in that unfavorable a spot to start off with here. Like clearly your range is doing quite well, and a lot of people would actually just like bet all the time on this board. So when you do check, you should still be defending really frequently. And because it's blind versus blind, you have so much trash that you just have to defend a lot of like semi-trash to this small sizing. That would be the kind of heuristic there. The third thing you said was about raising, so let's explore that now. You said that you thought the raises would come from like 5-3 and 5-4. We went for 6-4 not being a raise. Actually, it is. The way that you could teach that is that you could say, because the world is not that unfavorable for you, you started off with a fairly good range advantage. You forfeited a bit of your EV by checking and then facing a bit more, but still the texture is good enough for you that you can have some low EV bluffs here. You're not like handcuffed to having like really, really powerful immediate draws here when you're bluffing, but you were right about, you know, the things like the 5-3, of course, that's like the obvious ones, the 5-3, the 5-4, but you can expand that into stuff that unblocks this folding, the stabbing range, you know, that's going to be like mediocre cards that's bet folding here in our opponent's range, and also having some backdoors as well. So nice little kind of profitable raises, not even break-even raises, but profitable raises with 6-4. And it's crazy that you can even call 6-4 of spades here, right? That looks a bit weird, but you can.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, another thing I just quickly noticed was like the king deuce, queen deuce, like the bottom pair merge raises are even getting them there and doing pretty well. So that's something I probably
we call these hybrids then. Yeah, hybrid raises. So we won't go into that now because it's a huge can of worms, but yeah, good observation. Sure. So then at this point in the training drill, Akshar would write down on ace jack deuce or boards like this, favorable boards that are high, we have to defend counterintuitively wide. And then he would note down some examples of hands, and also, you know, note down what you learned about the backdoor flimsy hands being more continuable than he thought, and then finally write down a bit about the raise frequency being a bit more liberal with these backdoor draws than he thought. So basically, actually, we could summarize by saying you need to be more liberal in this spot than you currently are, and you need to put more emphasis on the fact that the texture is good for you, and the ranges are so wide that you can overfold very easily accidentally, right, if you're not careful.
Certainly, yeah, this has definitely taught me a few things that I will definitely have made mistakes with, so yeah.
All right, let's do another spot then. Next example hand, we have the 10-6, same spot, we're facing 1/3, and hopefully the idea is we'll get better and better at this as we move through this exercise, because we're already learning things about how the spot works. What are your heuristics going to be about this spot? Let's start off with the one that's about your hand class.
Hand class is obviously a flush draw, and I know that flush draws are going to be a mixing between raise and call. So I'm just going to try and see if this particular flush draw leans me to go any other, like a certain way. I think because it's like the 10 high flush draw, it doesn't have, like, there's two competing thoughts here. One is that we don't have much showdown value, but the other is we do have the overcard to the 8. So our 10 is live sometimes, and even our 6 is live sometimes. So I think I'm going to lean towards call, but definitely we should be raising this at a fair clip. This is kind of a cop-out answer, so I'm going to give a proper answer here. I'm going to say 60% call, 40% raise. Yeah.
I think that's pretty reasonable. And it's important for people to understand that there's a very wide array of hands which are, in theory, just known as optional bluffs, right? We talk about this in Carrot Poker School, Grade 1, Lecture 3, and also a bit in Grade 2, about how hands can raise as a bluff in spots like this. They don't have to, and they shouldn't always in GTO, but they should at some frequency in order to create the right strategy. Okay, great. On to heuristic number 2, which is going to be about defense thresholds.
Immediately, we should first go into, I guess, the offsuit hands and the diamonds and clubs hands that are going to be on this node. And I think we're going to have to, from remembering the other sim we just played, like trying to improve on what we had before, we're going to kind of say that our overcards are definitely probably going to have to defend here, like as bad as like ace 10 or ace 9 of clubs, I think is going to have to continue for this small size, trying to be a bit sensitive to sizing as well. So the worst hand that we can continue here, I think I'm going to say that like if we have like 10-9 of diamonds, that's probably going to have to fold. But we're going to have to continue like even offsuit overcards at some frequency with the heart. So like queen jack with 1 heart might have to continue here. I'm trying to think of like what the worst. So we're obviously not holding any pairs just to get that yep. in. Mm-hmm. Not folding any pairs. Not folding. Probably have to continue all semi-decent spades, even as bad as like 4-5 of spades is also a backdoor straight draw, so we're going to have to continue that. But in terms of like the diamonds and the clubs hands, I think we're going to have to strictly be going for cards over the 8. Mm-hmm. So like a hand like jack 10 of clubs might have to probably continue sometimes because it's got a backdoor straight draw. Like,
I can see now you're really trying to like fight against your impulse to fold that hand because you were told off last time for being a bit too tight in the spot. Yeah. Okay, fair.
Exactly.
So it follows from that then that you think hands like ace queen of diamonds are like pure continues here, is that right? Or
I don't think we'll be folding ace queen of diamonds, like knowing what we know from what before, and that hand cannot be a fold because we're drawing to semi good outs, and you know he could still be betting some ace high, I guess. Probably not because he's Pio, but yeah.
You mean pair draws are a thing? People just neglect pair draws, no? Like none of my students ever talk about pair draws. I'm like, hey, think of pair draws.
This sizing we have to call for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think being able to like turn an ace or a queen is like much better than turning like some terrible pairs. And the kicker issues as well. When you have ace queen and you turn a queen, or you have ace queen and you turn an ace, you're going to dominate all of the other variants of that pair, right? Which is super important as well. Cool. Okay, and your third heuristic, please, which is going to be about your raise frequency, hand selection, that kind of thing. I wouldn't mind as well this time, something we didn't talk about last time, which was fine, but maybe this time we can actually note down a little bit about the value raises that we would use and like where that would start and frequencies and things. So off you go.
So I think we can raise pretty liberally for value, like probably top pair with like a 10 or even a jack. I think is like 10 or a jack is going to be my threshold. So like king, jack, king 10. Because it's like blind versus blind, he'll be betting an 8, he'll be bet calling an 8, he'll be bet calling a 3. He'll be bet calling all of his pairs that he bets for the sizing and backdoor. So like I'm pretty happy to raise most kings. What's our raise size? 60%. Yeah, definitely we're happy to raise most kings. So that's kind of like my minimum value threshold. Now I'm just thinking, do we want to raise ace 8? I think that might be a bit too thin, even in this node. Like I wouldn't be totally shocked if ace 8 of spades is raised somehow, but I'm not confident in that, so I'm not gonna say that. But we can definitely raise some 3x, I assume, given what we saw before with the backdoor flush draw. That's kind of hybridy, so we'll leave that out. And obviously we're going to be raising our 2 pairs and our sets and our ace king and king queen. That's fairly routine. They're good enough to be pure raises.
Okay. What about bluffs then?
So bluffs, we're definitely going to have like the backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw hand, 6, 7, 4, 5 of spades. Those are definitely going to get in there. I think even as like any backdoor will like have the ability to raise, like even as bad as like jack 7 or jack 6 of spades. I don't think we have to dive into like diamond hands and like club hands. I don't think we have to do that. I could be wrong, but I'm happy to say that. But I think we also have to raise some like ace of hearts offsuit X hands. So we have bluffs on like various runouts. I think that's going to happen. So like ace of hearts, 5 of clubs might have to raise sometimes.
Cool. Let's take a look then. Yeah. Okay, so here we see the solution. So your first heuristic was about our actual hand, and you basically said that these flush draws would be mixes. Yeah, I mean, as we can see here, look at the bottom right here, by the way, guys, not the overall hand chart, because we're seeing in the middle there, you're seeing all of the suits. It's a common beginner mistake with solvers to just look at 10-6 suited without looking at the suit. It's very important that you have hearts or spades and not clubs or diamonds. Hearts is obviously far better than all of the other suits. So interestingly, yeah, they're all kind of optional bluffs, right? They're all mixes. I don't think it's worth constructing heuristics about which of these you actually want to raise at which frequencies. I think it's okay just to mix them at some frequency. You know, there are no magic beanstalks that you get to climb up if you get the frequency right that leads you to magic beans. Like, we're giving you the magic beans right here. You know, you don't have to worry about frequencies. Okay, so good job on that. Although I'd be a bit worried if you didn't think that they were mixes at your level. So good job.
Yeah.
Secondly, we were discussing defense thresholds, and you were saying that things like even jack 10 of clubs might have to defend, and you've done a really good job here, because what you've done is that you've calibrated your instinct from the first hand that we looked at and honed it into the spot, and you've basically had to fight against your natural inclination, which was saying fold jack 10 of clubs, that's a trash hand, because you recall the pattern now of having some decent pair draw, backdoor straight draws, overcards to the 8, which, as you've correctly remarked, you know, villain is going to be betting on this node at a fair frequency. So yeah, I think you've done a good job with that. Going further down into like other types of hand here, you were noting some stuff about like the backdoor like 7-5 hands and stuff like that. And yeah, they do have to continue. The backdoor 5-4 absolutely having to continue in one form or another. Is there anything else I'm missing here that you talked about? Like ace queen, you said was a pure continue, even with clubs, and it's a huge mistake. It's actually a one big blind error to fold ace queen of clubs here. And I've seen students do it. You know, it's a common mistake that you get as a coach. Anything I'm missing here from that heuristic about defense thresholds?
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. The only one of the things that I was maybe not getting was like the jack 10 offsuits and the queen 10 offsuits are more continues than not. And I think that's somewhere like it's a very small part of range, so I have to remember that, you know, it's not a huge mistake. I've definitely improved from the last time, which is kind of what I aim was, but we are trying to get better. And like, I'm just curious, like even ace 3 is ace 3 is a pair, right? Yeah, cool. So yeah, I mean, it looks fairly good here. I'd only be surprised if something like ace deuce of diamonds is a continue. I hope that's not a continue.
It can actually turn itself into like this.
It can.
I mean,
yeah, it's fine. Like, I'll take that. But yeah.
Here's a heuristic, right? Like when you have an overcard to a very high card, you don't have that very often. So it's a bit of a unique kind of position to be in to actually have an overcard on a king high board, right? You have to have exactly an ace. And therefore you will see some of these like backdoor wheel aces, even if they don't have the flush draw or backdoor, still able to compete and actually break even by raising here, but not by calling. Basically, the raise requirements will be a bit more lenient than the call requirements when it comes to trash looking hands, because of the fold equity we get to generate when we raise. Okay, on to heuristic 3, which is about the raising in general. You've said that you're happy raising with most king X. I mean, I think the kicker does really matter here because villain is betting all king X for the sizing. So it seems like the solver... Yeah, so the solver draws the line at around king 7, king 8 here, but that's not too far off from what you were saying. In terms of bluff raises, yeah, things like the 7-6 backdoor, kind of crazy, right? That even like the more backdoor straight draws you have, the less backdoor flush draws you need, perhaps. So something like 7-6 of diamonds creeping in there, actually breaking even as a bluff raise. Now, the solver isn't doing it all the time. Shall we talk to the audience a bit about why? Because this is a question I may get in the comments, right? We may get is, why is the solver not doing it more often if it's an okay thing to do, if it's a break-even thing to do? Do you want to talk about the meta kind of implications of that if we were to always raise it?
So basically, the solver is clairvoyant. So if you do it every time, then the other solver will react accordingly and therefore make it not 0 EV anymore. Yeah, it won't be able to sustain so many bluff raises in its strategy. So this has come from the solver playing against itself millions of times. And it's determined that this is perfect and these are the exact kind of frequencies we need to hit to allow the other solver not to gain from your strategy. So that's kind of how it works. Yeah. And if it does it even more, then the other solver will be able to passively exploit it, like by just playing the range correctly.
So yeah, we have to remember that GTO is played with perfect information. One solver knows what the other one is doing. That's not the case in reality. So of course, if you're against an opponent who you think is folding too much or stabbing too wide or something like that, or stabbing too merged for no reason, you can actually just argue for always raising with a hand like the 7-6 of clubs, because it's going to swing to become positive, right? Okay, let's do another spot. Finally, dealer, a nice hand. So we have the pocket skyscrapers here. We're in the small blind. We've checked again. The big blind to stab. This guy's very bet happy, although we have programmed him to always bet. So he has to have his betting range here. He's not betting all the time. He's betting with his betting range, but we've programmed it so that he always has his stabbing range in this spot, guys, just for clarity. Akshar, 3 heuristics. The first one should be about pocket aces. The second one should be about defense thresholds. And the third one a bit about raising. And I think there'll be some overlap here between 1 and 3, maybe. Maybe not. Let's see.
I think aces, well, we obviously are not folding aces, so it's going to be a pure continue. It's going to mix raise and call. I think actually a lot of call. It doesn't need much protection. Villain's going to continue betting his king X sometimes on the turn of the river, so we don't lose that much value. But also, I don't think like we're looking to raise stack off aces necessarily, blind versus blind, when he has abundance of 8x. So yeah, I think we're going to be mixing raise with aces, probably leaning more towards call with aces and not raise. That's kind of where I'm going to go there.
Interesting. We're also unblocking bluffs, right? And kind of blocking ace high, backdoor ace high bet calls, perhaps. So I could see how with those particular blockers, we're just making dead hands that we dominate really prevalent in our opponent's range. Yeah, I think I'm on board with you there that it will be an optional thing, but it'll be mostly calling. Yeah, that's a good heuristic. Okay, on to number 2. Defense thresholds.
Defense thresholds. Ooh. So we'll start with like the easiest kind of low hanging fruit. No pairs are going to fold. I find it difficult to believe a pair is going to fold on a paired board. And now, like, the next easiest hanging fruit would be the ace highs. Do I think any of the ace highs are going to start folding yet? I think some of the offsuit ace highs might have to... this is actually pretty tough. Let's think about this. I'm going to say no offsuit ace high is going to fold unless it's, like, literally the bottom ace deuce and ace 3 offsuit. That's, like, kind of where I'm going to draw my line. I think there is some value in, like, ace 5 because we will sometimes, like, hit a 5 and be good against his 4s through deuces. Like, it's such a minute thing, but... maybe it's just about enough. I think we're going to be continuing pretty much every backdoor with a semi-decent, like, straight draw, flush draw. So, like, 7-6 of diamonds and hearts are going to probably do some raising, even 5-4. So now I'm kind of trying to figure out like what we fold. I even think, like, 10-9 of clubs has to continue, Jack-10 of clubs probably has to continue.
So deeply counterintuitive, right? Like these hands, but we do see this in wide range spots. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a very wide range spot. So anything above the 8 probably has to continue. So like 2 cards between the king and the 8 probably have to continue at probably pure frequencies because we're so wide. So like our folds are going to come from the absolute like trash, like the seven. What's the worst? Like queen seven offsuit. Do we even raise that? Like things like that. But yeah, it's a small bet, so you have to be aware of that.
Mhm.
And it's a wide range spot, so you have to be very aware of that too. So yeah, I'm struggling to kind of. I think like so like let's say Jack 10 off. Do I think I have to fold Jack 10 off? I think I have to continue that. To be fair, knowing what we know from previously, I think we actually have to continue Jack 10 off, 10 9 off, even maybe. So I'm gonna stick to that. That's kind of be like my threshold.
Do you think there's something to be said for the fact that on this board we're much more dead against villains' value range, like with King X and 8X, whereas in the previous example, a lot of their value bets, there was only 1-8 on the board, I believe, and therefore Jack 10 had 2 overcards to that. What about the idea that Jack 10 has no overcards against King X or 8X now, so there's more hands we're dead against? I don't know if that's, I'm just kind of
I
just
think
riffing here,
actually like I might be wrong, but I think he could value bet as deep as Ace Jack offsuit.
Ace Jack or something. Yeah, so there's maybe some that we do have live cards
So-
against.
And like I think like he will definitely be like betting 7 through deuces at some frequency as well.
Mhm.
So maybe we're less dead, but it's a tough like I could definitely be like this is one of those things where our heuristic works for the first 2 spots and then it doesn't work. It breaks apart for this one
Right.
because it's 8 pairs and it changes the whole thing. So I'm happy to be wrong here, but I'm gonna stick to like what we've learned from before, and I'm gonna say like Jack 9 is probably gonna like continue, but like Jack 7 won't. Like Jack 7 of like clubs probably won't continue because
Sure.
it's not good enough. So that's kind of like where I'm gonna go.
Yeah, and I'm always trying to remember that you're trying to meet like a defense frequency in this spot. So when villain bets third pot, you're needing to defend like 3/4 of your range just to make them indifferent, right? Like that's something that you can't forget. So that explains why hands like Queen Jack here of clubs, for example, probably won't be a fold, right? Because if you do that, you're probably eating into 35% of your range that you're folding now. And that's too much. You're making stats really automatically profitable for your opponent in a spot where their range advantage doesn't really merit that. And do you want to say a little bit about where our sort of raises are going to be? Like what's the sort of worst hand you would raise for value here? Is it aces or would you raise some King X? And then like say a little bit about your bluff selection here too. And also how often you're raising too, right? Might be a cool factor like globally with your range.
Paired boards are tough. I would say like I'm gonna be raising I don't think I want to raise aces as much, but obviously that will be in there. I think we want to raise some King X that ideally doesn't block ace high continues that with the back doors. So like ace king with the ace of like clubs might do it. And like even king queen can probably do it sometimes if we're keeping our raise sizes quite small and we're not trying to polarize towards an 8 or 4 houses or something. Yeah, that's kind of like where my threshold's going to be for value. Like I don't see myself raising. Maybe it's wrong. I don't see myself raising queens or jacks or tens here. They're too kind of middling and don't have much improvability. But like even when we raise a king, like if he has an 8, we can still hit a king or something, right? So it's not a big deal. It's not as a big deal. I guess it is, but yeah. Mostly, I think our bluffs are going to come from like double back doors, and that's pretty much all you can get, really. I don't know if we get to like raise random trash. There's no real like hybrid raises on these kind of boards, right? It's not really possible to have a hybrid raise. So we're going to be leaning towards the back doors. So now we just have to think about what's the worst back door. I think 6-4 will make it. I think 5-4 will make it, or 4-3 of relevant suits.
Is 4-3 a backdoor still? It's not, right? Because you need like 3 more cards to come there.
Yeah, 4-3 is not a backdoor. Well, it's a backdoor flush draw. That's
right.
All right. It's not a backdoor straight draw. I don't think 4-3 makes it. So right. I'm gonna fold 4-3 or I'm gonna fold 4-3 and like raise like 5-6, 7-5. All these like double backdoors and like we have some like queen 10, jack 10 as well that we can raise.
That's cool.
So it's a tough one, but yeah.
Yeah, and people may wonder, why are we being this explicit? It's because we're going to be in this spot with lots of different hands, not just pocket aces. And that's why, guys, we're really making an effort to map out what our overall range is up to here so that we can recognize these patterns for next time and apply them. So actually, I'll summarize your kind of heuristics here. So you thought the aces would usually be a call. It's unblocking bluffs. It's blocking some continues, but there may be some raise with it. You then moved on to talk about thresholds, and you were sort of saying that even hands as bad as like jack 10 or jack 9 of clubs here may be forced to defend, just in the spirit of trying to defend most of a really, really wide range. You also talked a little bit about ace high and said that all of the ace high, apart from the very weakest ones like ace 3 off or ace 3 of clubs or something, if we don't have that, most of them would be calling, but those very weakest ones could be folding. And then thirdly, onto raise frequency, you said that some of the King X that unblocks the backdoor draws that are bet calling here, like the ace X backdoor draws, so King X of clubs in particular, it's a cool concept, may actually be raising here. And then you noted that we'd obviously be raising some of our 8X aces rarely and bluffing double backdoor things, but not as low as maybe as low as 6-4 or 5-4 suited. So that's my summary of what you said there. Let's take a look at the results now. So here we see the game theory solution. Let's go straight to pocket aces. I mean, you're bang on, you're allowed to raise, but it's basically just calling for the reasons that you mentioned. Interestingly, king queen, a hand that unblocks more bet calls, is going to be raising because villain has more ace-x that can bet call now, so that makes sense why that's the case. Secondly, on to thresholds, let's look at the jack 10 of clubs for a second. You're absolutely right, it just about gets in there. Jack 9 of clubs is a mix, so you're very close here, and you can see, guys, that Akshar's basically recalibrated himself to these spots. I wonder how much money making this YouTube video for our YouTube audience is going to make you in return by improving your defense frequencies in these spots. I think there's been a lot of progress here just in these few hands that we've done. So it just shows you what focused practice can really do. It can teach you heuristics, and training in this way really can fix holes in your game, even when you're quite an experienced player like Akshar is. If you don't know much about Akshar, by the way, we have another video where we introduce him more fully. It's called Indian Destroyer versus 200 Zoom Pool, and it's from a few months ago, but you can look that one up. Thirdly, we were talking about, I should also just correct you very kind of quickly here that all ace high, just the showdown value of ace high is going to go up here. And also the other thing that you need to say about a spot like this is just that, again, it's a king high board. It's hard to have an overcard. You do have an overcard with ace deuce and not with queen deuce, right? So that's another very big difference, showdown value aside.
Yes.
Cool. Thirdly, we talked about your raises, so double backdoors, 10-8, things like that. You went down as far as 6-5. That was okay. The solver said by the time you were at 5-4, you were kind of, you were no longer able to raise. I think that's quite a big EV loss, actually, when we get down there. Because I guess the backdoor straight that you make on, when a 7 and a 6 comes is actually trash because 10-9, well, it's not trash, but it's unnutted, absolutely, yeah, well put. So differentiating maybe between backdoors that have more live pair draws and make better straights and ones that make worse straights and have more dominated pair draws is definitely a cool example. If you turn a 5, but the river is a 10, you may lose to a pair of 10s. If you have a 10 and the river is a 10 and the turn is a 5, you may beat a pair of 5s with your pair of 10s. So it's just food for thought. And then finally, we talked a little bit about like the kind of value raising. And yeah, we do go down to things like King Jack. There aren't really hybrids here. You did a great job of mentioning that we don't raise hands like jacks or queens here. That's actually a blunder. And the reason for that actually comes down to villain's polarization on a board like King 8-8. What people need to understand, what students of No Limit Hold'em need to know, is that villain is actually quite inherently polar on King 8-8 because they have two extremely high EV value betting regions. If I go to the in position range here and I look at the EV, you can see that both 8x and King X are very, very high EV, and then everything else is much lower EV. So that constitutes a much more polarized range, right? So yeah, really good job. Okay, we're going to wrap this up. I know we've only done a few spots, but I think we've got the point across. I think you've already grown just in the 30 minutes it's taken us to do this exercise, actually, and I think you'll play blind versus blind a bit better. Anything you want to say about your own sort of journey in the coaching session we just had and how maybe you'll make better use of your study time now that we've learned this sort of exercise compared to what you were doing before?
Yeah, so I mean, I've already seen some immediate improvement just by the 3 hands we did, not even counting some of the ones we did in private. This is definitely an exercise I'm going to be doing probably more frequently. Like probably this is going to be how I study from now on. Like not trying to go into super high detail, but obviously going into decent detail. And yeah, this should hopefully make me a bit more accurate in these spots where I feel like it's very easy to overfold, under defend, or under raise, or whatever the case may be in every spot. So yeah, cool. This was fun, and hopefully we can make you some more videos or something like this again.
Absolutely, man. We would love to have you back on the channel soon, guys. In the chat, let us know, people, what do you think of this sort of session? Did you enjoy having Akshar on? Give him a bit of encouragement. I'm sure we can get him, coerce him to come back on the channel soon. And do remember, it's all about accuracy. It's all about being really explicit about what you're saying. It's about having the right protocol and listing 3 heuristics that in this spot it happened to be, what does our hand do? What's our defense thresholds and what we're raising? But that would be different if we had a bluff opportunity, for example, right? Be different heuristics, but have a think about what 3 you should be doing. And finally, give yourself feedback. Look at the solver, try and get feedback here. If you don't have a solver and stuff, you can still do this with friends who do, you can find subscriptions to cheap solvers. You can look stuff up. The best way to do this is with your own custom sims built in something like PioSolver, but there are other shortcuts if you don't own PioSolver currently. Another thing you can do is get the Carrot Poker School, because we do stuff like this all the time in the Carrot Poker School. We have theory lessons basically built around extracts from solvers, so we actually do the solving for you and present the data so that you don't need to actually do it yourself. So those are options as well. See you guys on the next video here at Carrot Corner Poker Education. and we will teach you some more stuff very soon. Bye for now, guys.